The Iron Maiden is one of the most infamous torture devices in history, but its true power may not have been in how often it was used, but in how deeply it lived in the imagination. To the medieval mind, the prospect of being enclosed in a coffin lined with spikes was a terror beyond comprehension. Whether it was employed frequently, sparingly, or even primarily as legend, the Iron Maiden became a symbol of fear so powerful that its reputation alone could break the spirit before any iron door ever closed. The device itself was imposing, shaped like a standing sarcophagus, tall enough to contain a human body. It was crafted of heavy wood or iron and lined with spikes pointing inward. Hinged doors opened to reveal the spiked interior. Once closed, the victim was trapped upright in suffocating darkness, pierced by dozens of blades. The spikes were usually arranged to wound but not kill immediately, sliding into flesh, grazing organs, pressing against bone. This ensured that death, if it came, was slow and that pain was constant. Even if not every medieval dungeon possessed such a device, the image of it spread widely. Chroniclers, storytellers, and rulers alike found in the Iron Maiden a perfect emblem of cruelty. It represented the cold ingenuity of human torture, the blending of confinement, stabbing, and suffocation into a single fate. The thought alone was enough to haunt prisoners. The mere rumor of its presence in a castle or inquisitorial chamber could bend the will of the accused, much as the rack's threat often compelled confessions without a single crank of its rollers. What makes the Iron Maiden so terrifying is that it fused two primal fears: impalement and entombment. To be pierced is one horror, to be buried alive, another. Victims imagined themselves pressed into the coffin, spikes entering their skin as the doors closed, tighter and tighter until they could no longer breathe. The darkness would be absolute, the space too narrow to move, the iron too strong to break. The body became its own prison, pinned against itself, every breath pressing wounds deeper. Few terrors could equal this claustrophobic agony. The psychological weight of this image spread far beyond the dungeons. Rumors of the Iron Maiden appeared in towns and marketplaces, whispered as warnings of what awaited heretics or traitors. Parents used its legend to frighten children into obedience. Rulers displayed the device, whether genuine or ceremonial, to remind their subjects that rebellion would be met with unimaginable punishment. The Iron Maiden became theater, an object less about frequent use than about public symbolism. Its looming presence in memory and imagination did more work than 100 executions. And yet, the very ambiguity of its use made it more frightening. If it had been routine, it would have been another horror cataloged in the grim litany of medieval punishments. But because its reality was shadowed by rumor, every prisoner was left wondering, was it myth, or would the door truly close on them? That uncertainty gave it a supernatural edge. Like a ghost story told in a village square, its power lay not in fact alone, but in the dread of possibility. The Iron Maiden did not need to consume countless victims to maintain its legend. The thought of it was enough. In this way, the Iron Maiden transcended the physical realm of torture devices to become a cultural weapon. It stood as a reminder of how power operates not only through what it does, but through what it threatens. For the rulers and inquisitors who invoked it, the Maiden was less about practicality than about dominance. To possess one was to claim a reputation for merciless authority. To speak of one was to spread fear wider than any army could march. So was the Iron Maiden a myth? Perhaps in part. Historians debate whether it was used as described, or whether its legend grew from a combination of earlier practices exaggerated into a monstrous whole. But myth does not weaken its terror. it strengthens it. The Iron Maiden was more terrifying precisely because people could not be sure. It was less a coffin of spikes than a coffin of fear, enclosing the mind as surely as its imagined iron doors enclosed the body. The Iron Maiden has often been dismissed as a fabrication, a device born more of imagination than of use. Yet its legend did not spring from nowhere. Behind the tall, spiked sarcophagus stood centuries of real, brutal punishments that shaped its myth into something chillingly plausible. The Maiden may not have been as common as the rack or the gallows, but it drew its terror from methods of torture that were all too real. To understand why the Iron Maiden was believed, one must trace its roots in the darker traditions of punishment and execution. Long before the Maiden was described, executioners and inquisitors across Europe employed forms of confinement and stabbing as punishment. Spiked coffins, for instance, appeared in some accounts designed to trap the condemned within a cage of iron, lined with sharp edges. These devices may not have looked exactly like the Maiden we imagine today, but the principle was the same: to combine restraint with wounds that tormented without immediately killing. Similarly, impalement, a method infamous across Europe and Asia, showed how piercing the body could prolong death in grotesque ways. The coffin, like design, also drew upon a universal fear: burial alive. Medieval justice often employed forms of enclosure, from cages hung in public squares to cells so small a man could not stand. Such punishments magnified claustrophobia, forcing the prisoner to feel their own body closing in upon them. The Iron Maiden simply added spikes to what was already a terrifying practice of confinement, merging suffocation with piercing. It was not invented in a vacuum. It was an evolution. Inquisition records also mention forms of punishment where victims were pressed into tight spaces with blades or nails driven into their flesh. Sometimes these were described as interrogation boxes or punishment chambers. While not all of these descriptions match the later, iconic Maiden, they show that the idea of a spiked enclosure was not an impossible invention of storytellers. Rather, it was a refinement of punishments that already existed, made into a single horrifying device that captured the imagination. The design of the Iron Maiden also echoed medieval obsession with spectacle. Punishment was never only about the victim, it was about the community that witnessed it. Devices that combined multiple agonies, piercing, suffocation, isolation, were valued for the fear they spread. Even if the Maiden was rare, its image drew credibility because it resonated with methods that communities already knew. The stretching of the rack, the flames of the stake, the public cages of criminals left to rot. The Maiden was simply the most complete synthesis of those cruelties. Some historians argue that the first true descriptions of the Iron Maiden appear only in the late Middle Ages and early modern period, suggesting that the device may have been exaggerated or even reconstructed from fragments of earlier torture practices. But this does not weaken the connection. It strengthens it. People accepted the stories because they knew torture had already reached such depths. They had seen impalements, burnings, and dismemberments. To imagine a coffin lined with spikes was not to leap into fantasy. It was to extend the logic of cruelty one step further. The real roots of the Maiden also explain why it was so terrifying. It was not a bizarre anomaly, disconnected from the punishments of its time. It was the natural culmination of a world where pain was ritualized, sanctified, and displayed. When people heard of the Maiden, they did not dismiss it as impossible. They recognized it as consistent with the horrors they already knew. That recognition gave the legend its credibility, and credibility gave it power. Thus, even if the Iron Maiden was not rolled out in every dungeon, it was forged from very real practices of cruelty. It was not fantasy, but continuity, a merging of burial, piercing, and confinement into a single emblem. Its legend, grew precisely because it was believable. The people of the Middle Ages did not need proof. They needed only to imagine themselves locked within, and their imagination filled the gaps with memories of what they had already seen inflicted on others. In this way, the Iron Maiden's roots in real torture practices ensured its permanence. Whether or not its doors closed on countless victims, its shadow stretched across centuries, reminding humanity that the line between legend and reality is often thinner than the iron walls of a coffin. The Iron Maiden's cruelty was not only in the spikes that pierced the flesh, but in the suffocating entombment it imposed. To be locked inside was to face a terror that combined pain with the most primal of fears, confinement in darkness alone, unable to move. This was torture of the mind as much as of the body. Even if the wounds were shallow, even if death did not come immediately, the Iron Maiden destroyed its victims by turning their own thoughts into tormentors. The coffin stood tall, its iron doors swinging open like the arms of a grave waiting to close. The spikes that lined its interior were not arranged to kill quickly. Most were set at angles that pierced skin, slid between ribs, or pressed into limbs without striking the heart. A victim placed inside would feel a dozen blades entering at once, not fatally, but cruelly, leaving them impaled and trapped in their own blood. The doors then shut, and the world vanished. Darkness replaced light. Silence swallowed sound, broken only by the rasp of shallow breath. The victim was still alive, still conscious, still fully aware. That awareness was the true torture. Claustrophobia amplified every sensation, pressed against iron, unable to shift even slightly. Every attempt to breathe pushed wounds deeper. The body strained against immovable walls, but the space allowed no movement. The spikes made the victim's own flesh the enemy. Every twitch another wound. Hours dragged on like days. Time dissolved into an endless present of pain and dread. The psychological weight of such confinement was devastating. Human beings are not built for stillness. In darkness and immobility, the mind races. Hallucinations creep in, visions of escape turning into nightmares of death. Panic rises, the heartbeat quickens, and the chest strains for air. The Iron Maiden became a coffin of the living, a tomb that offered no release but exhaustion and despair. It was not just the body being pierced, but the spirit being buried alive. What made this horror worse was its silence. Unlike the rack, where screams echoed and joints cracked audibly, the Iron Maiden consumed its victims in solitude. Once the doors closed, there was no spectacle, no audience, only a human soul locked away in terror. The prisoners' screams, if they could be heard at all, were muffled through iron, fading into whispers. For those outside, the silence itself became a chilling sound, a reminder that agony could unfold quietly in the dark. Survivors, if any were released, spoke of madness more than wounds. The piercing spikes healed. The fear of the coffin did not. Some described waking in sweat, convinced the iron doors were closing again. Others trembled at small, dark spaces, unable to bear confinement of any kind. In a society that offered no language for trauma, such victims carried their suffering alone, haunted by a torture chamber they could not escape even in sleep. The Maiden thus extended its reach far beyond the dungeon, its psychological scars becoming lifelong prisons. Communities, too, absorbed the fear. Tales of the Maiden spread quickly, embroidered with details of men driven insane before they died, or women whose screams were never heard again once the doors closed. These stories traveled farther than the device itself, magnifying its impact. People came to believe that the coffin's silence was worse than open torture, that to vanish into it was to lose not only life but dignity, identity, and voice. The Maiden became less an object than a ghost haunting the imagination, feeding off humanity's deepest anxieties. This psychological dimension made the maiden a uniquely effective tool of power. To show it to a prisoner was to plant dread in their mind before a hand was even laid on them. The thought of being locked upright in darkness, pierced but not killed, left many ready to confess, submit, or betray their own cause. The maiden, therefore, was not just about what it did, but about what people thought it could do. Fear of the device was as potent as the device itself. In the end, the Iron Maiden exemplified how torture thrived on the mind as much as the body. Its spikes could wound, yes, but it was the entombment, the suffocating stillness, the silence of being trapped alive that delivered the greatest cruelty. The body could endure pain, but the mind, locked in darkness with no hope of release, broke far faster. And it was that breaking, not death, that gave the Iron Maiden its terrifying reputation. The Iron Maiden was never just a coffin of spikes. It was a weapon of authority. In an age when kings ruled by divine right, and the church claimed the keys to heaven, the device became a symbol of what awaited those who strayed from obedience. Whether or not it was used as frequently as lore suggests, its image carried a political and religious weight that magnified its terror. To speak of the Iron Maiden was to speak of justice, order, and faith, all enforced through pain. In the medieval world, punishment was spectacle, and spectacle was power. Executions drew crowds not only to kill criminals, but to remind citizens of their place in the hierarchy. The Iron Maiden fit perfectly into this theater. Its looming sarcophagus, like presence, looked less like a machine than like an idol, a shrine to authority itself. When rulers displayed it, they were not merely showing a tool of torture. They were demonstrating their willingness to crush rebellion, heresy, or treason without hesitation. The church, too, found use for its reputation. Inquisitions thrived on fear, and few images inspired dread like the thought of a heretic pressed into a spiked coffin. Priest could point to the maiden as a symbol of what happened to souls that defied orthodoxy. It embodied divine wrath as much as human cruelty, suggesting that punishment in this world mirrored the eternal torments of the next. To stand accused before both priest and magistrate was to see the maiden as an earthly shadow of hell itself. Politically, the device functioned as deterrence. Rulers did not need to use it on every rebel or traitor. They only needed enough stories circulating to keep subjects obedient. The legend of the maiden spread more widely than the device itself, whispered in villages, passed along by merchants, embroidered by chroniclers. People believed in it because they had already seen the rack, the stake, and the gallows. If such cruelties were possible, why not this? The belief alone made the Iron Maiden a weapon sharper than any sword. The psychological reach of the maiden made it especially useful in suppressing dissent. A soldier might face death on the battlefield bravely, but the thought of being locked alive in darkness, pierced by spikes, drained courage before rebellion could even begin. To plot against authority was to gamble not just with one's life, but with the prospect of a death so drawn out, so humiliating, that it erased all hope of martyrdom. The rack might break the body, but the maiden promised to devour it entirely. This made the device an invaluable symbol in times of unrest. In periods of heretical movements, peasant uprisings, or political conspiracies, rulers invoked the maiden's reputation to silence opposition. The fact that its actual use is historically uncertain did not matter. Power does not depend on frequency, it depends on fear. The maiden's myth was enough to hold whole communities in check, ensuring obedience where loyalty could not be guaranteed. Even in display, the Iron Maiden radiated power. To see one standing in a castle dungeon or a city square was to feel the weight of authority in physical form. It was not just a machine hidden away for private cruelty. It was an emblem that rulers could show, a dark promise that rebellion would be answered with more than death. its spiked interior remained closed to most eyes. But its closed doors were perhaps more terrifying than if they had been left open. Mystery magnified its aura, suggesting horrors too terrible to be seen. The church's blessing gave it sanctity, and the crown's backing gave it legality together. They turned a device into an institution, a piece of iron into an instrument of governance. To resist either power was to risk being pressed into its embrace. And so, the Iron Maiden became not only a tool of torture, but a political sermon and a religious warning, forged to keep order in a world where fear was often more effective than justice. In this way, the Iron Maiden was less about spikes and blood than about control. It told people that their bodies, their faith, even their very breath belonged to higher powers. To stand against them was to invite not only earthly punishment, but a preview of eternal torment. It was not only a coffin, it was a message, and that message was clear. Disobedience would not only be punished, it would be annihilated, crushed into silence within iron walls that stood as monuments to power. The Iron Maiden occupies a strange place in history. Unlike the rack or the gallows, its documented use is uncertain. Its appearances in records scattered and often exaggerated. Some historians argue it was never employed as frequently as popular imagination suggests, perhaps even assembled in later centuries from fragments of medieval devices. Yet this uncertainty did not weaken its power, it strengthened it. For the Iron Maiden's true legacy was not in how often it was used, but in how deeply it took root in memory. Legend, in this case, was as terrifying as fact. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had already witnessed enough cruelty for the Maiden's image to take hold. People had seen burnings at the stake, impalements, flayings, and cages left to rot in public squares. Against this backdrop, the idea of a spiked coffin seemed not only plausible, but inevitable. Chroniclers wrote of it as though it were fact, weaving it into accounts of heretics, crushed by the church, or traitors punished by kings. These stories spread across borders, carried by rumor and retold in marketplaces and taverns, each retelling adding new horrors. The Maiden's legend thrived on ambiguity. Few could say for certain how it was used, but everyone knew someone who had heard of it. The uncertainty magnified the terror. To prisoners facing interrogation, the possibility was enough. Would they face the rack, the whip, or the Maiden itself? The not knowing gnawed at their resolve. Fear of the device did not require proof. It only required imagination, and imagination proved to be the most fertile soil for terror. Artists and writers ensured that the Maiden's reputation outlived the Middle Ages. Renaissance engravings and later illustrations depicted it in vivid detail. Iron doors swinging open to reveal spikes glinting in the dark. These images reinforced the myth, making it real to generations who never saw one firsthand. Even in museums centuries later, displayed maidens, often reconstructed from fragments or created as curiosities, drew crowds, their presence confirming what stories had long told. Visitors looked upon them not as relics of rumor, but as monuments of cruelty. The persistence of the legend speaks to a deeper truth. Human beings often fear symbols more than statistics. Even if the Maiden was rarely used, its reputation convinced people it was everywhere. Communities carried it in their collective memory as a warning, proof of what authority could do when challenged. It became shorthand for the brutality of the medieval world, invoked whenever people wished to describe the cruelty of the past. The legend became reality not in the dungeon, but in the mind. This transformation of myth into memory also served those in power. Rulers did not need to wield the Maiden constantly. They needed only for subjects to believe it existed. Fear of it did the work of armies, silencing dissent without a single spike being bloodied. The legend itself was the tool, spreading across time and space far more efficiently than the heavy device could ever be moved. In this sense, the Maiden was more effective as an idea than as an object. Even today, the Iron Maiden lingers as cultural shorthand for medieval brutality. Films, novels, and documentaries depict it as the ultimate torture device, cementing its place in popular imagination. Whether historians question its authenticity or not, the world has accepted it as real. The legend became reality not because it was used, but because it was believed. That belief has endured longer than any victim's scream, echoing across centuries, as if the doors of the Maiden never fully closed. And perhaps that is the most terrifying truth of all. The Iron Maiden reminds us that cruelty does not need to be constant to be effective. Sometimes it is enough for a story to spread, for an image to lodge in the mind. Pain inflicted once can scar for a lifetime. Pain imagined can haunt forever. The Maiden, whether fact or fiction, became immortal through memory, proving that legends can wound as deeply as iron spikes.